Hello friends, today I am going to narrate a story. I know all of you will be eagerly listening to this story. Do you want to know what the name of the story is? Yes, it's Sleeping Beauty. A princess will sleep for 100 years and will wake up after that. I'll narrate in the story. It's a very interesting story and it has a very good moral also. Let us go into the story.
Long years ago, in a faraway kingdom, there lived a brave and handsome king. The king was very kind and generous towards the people of his kingdom. He had friendly relations with his neighboring kingdoms. One day he went to visit another king of a far off land. The king of that country welcomed him and gave him all sorts of comfort and entertainment. The king of the far off land had a gentle and beautiful daughter. She was kind hearted and very lovely looking. She could sing like birds and dance like angels. When our king saw this beautiful princess, he fell in love with her. So he told the princess' father that he wanted to marry the princess. Hearing this, her father was overjoyed that his son in law was to be such a brave and handsome king and the ruler of a vast kingdom also. After a few days, they were married, and the king carried off his newly wedded queen to his kingdom. When they reached their country, the people of the kingdom were overjoyed to know that their king had married. And when they saw his beautiful wife, their joy knew no bounds. Moreover, the kindness and generosity of the new queen won the hearts of each and every person. They lived very happily in a magnificent castle. Many years passed, but unfortunately, they had no children, so they became very sad. They went to all the waters of life in the world, wars, pilgrimages, and all sorts of ways they could think of, but nothing happened. They were still childless. Many years passed like this. One summer, the queen felt very hot, unable to tolerate the heat. Backyard to take a shower. It was really very cool and soothing. Big shady trees grew along the banks of the pond, laden with juicy fruits. In the pond, there were beautiful lotus flowers. The air was filled with the fragrance of the flowers. While she was bathing, suddenly a frog jumped into the water with a splash. The queen became scared. The frog croaked. Don't be frightened. Then it continued, Oh, queen, why are you looking so sad? The queen was relieved to hear those words. So she replied, I'm sad because I do not have any children. My husband and I have prayed and gone on many pilgrimages, but it is of no use. On hearing this, the frog said to her, God is going to answer your prayer. Next year, a princess will be born and she will be very beautiful. At this, the queen was surprised. She was filled with a new hope. She returned home thinking about what the frog had told her. Then she decided to tell the king about it. So she went to her husband and told everything what has happened. When the king heard this, he was also surprised. Then he told his queen that it must be the will of the gods and surely their desire would be fulfilled one day. It happened as the frog had predicted. In due course, the queen gave birth to a beautiful baby daughter. The king and the queen were so happy. The baby girl was all pink and white and with a head full of golden curly hair. The girl was so pretty that the king could not control his joy and he decided to give a big feast for all the people of his kingdom. So the king said, After so many years, we are blessed with such a pretty and healthy daughter. Let us share our joy with all our friends and relatives as well as with the people of our kingdom. The queen also agreed. The baby was dressed with pretty clothes. Before the feast, there was held a very fine christening. He invited his kindred friends and acquaintances. Do not forget to invite the fairies, said the queen. Yes, I will not forget. The king agreed. He invited the good and the wise fairies in order that they might be kind and well disposed towards his child. Though the king did his best to invite all the fairies, he could not find one of them, so he could only invite 11 fairies. Moreover, every one of the fairies was to give the princess a boon, as was the custom of the fairies in those days. The day of the party came. After the christening ceremony, all the company returned to the king's palace from the church. The palace was beautifully decorated in the huge hall, brilliantly lighted with hundreds of candles. On the table, there was placed before every fairy a magnificent cover with the case of massive gold. There laid a spoon, fork, and knife, all made of pure gold and set with diamonds and rubies. The cooks prepared a wonderful feast. There were heaps and heaps of chicken, fry, and hams. Different kinds of pastries and ice creams were there. When the fairies were about to eat food, all of a sudden, the door of the banquet hall flew open and everyone stood amazed. Suddenly, the oldest fairy, whom the king could not find to invite, marched into the royal chamber of the king. She had been out of the certain tower. Everyone had believed her to be either dead or enchanted. She was dressed in black cloth and was shuffling along with the help of the king. Seeing her, the king quickly ordered a cover for her, but could not furnish it with a case of gold like others, because they had 11 made for the 11 fairies. The old fairy became very, very angry, and she felt that she was slighted by the royal family and muttered some threats between her teeth. The youngest fairy, who sat by her overhead, how she grumbled. She judged that the old fairy might give the little princess some unlucky gift, so she went away as soon as the other fairies rose from the table. Avoiding everyone's eyes, she hid himself behind the curtain so that she might speak last and repair as much as she could the evil which the old fairy might intend. The old fairy crackled quickly. "You didn't bother to invite me?" The king and the queen were frightened. They couldn't eat any food. After everyone had finished eating, the fairies went up one by one to the princess' cradle to give her their presents. "I will give you the gift of happiness," said one, "so that she will never be sad in her life." "I give her gift of lovely voice," said another one, "so that when she speaks it will sound like music." "I give her the gift of goodness," said a wise fairy, "so that she will be loved by everybody." The 10 fairies had given their presents when suddenly the cunning fairy quickly hid her anger from the people present in the feast and told the king and the queen that she too wanted to bestow upon the little princess a gift. As the old fairy had shown to everybody around that she was not angry anymore, everyone thought that she too was going to give the little princess some really nice gift. Nobody assumed that she was about to create some mischief. The old fairy came near the princess and put her magic wand on the baby's forehead. With her head shaking more with spite than with age, she said, "I too have brought the princess a magic gift." Then the fairy hobbled over to the cradle and pointed a long bony finger down at the baby. Being full of rage, she uttered a "When you are 16," she cursed, "you will prick your finger on a spindle and fall down dead." Then she left the hall before anyone could speak. All the people present in the room were horrified and fell silent as if thunderstruck. They all were dumbfounded with shock. This terrible gift made the whole company tremble and everybody started crying. The very thought that the pretty little princess, who was already the beloved of everyone, would die only after 15 years, made the queen burst into tears. The 12th fairy, who had heard and seen everything that had taken place, came out from behind the curtain and spoke these words aloud. "I can't break any others fairies magic spell," she said, "but I can assure your majesty that you shall not miss your daughter. I am casting my good spell on the princess." The fairy continued, "The princess will prick her finger on a spindle, but she will not die. Instead, she will fall into a deep sleep for 100 years. She will wake up when a prince will come to the palace and kiss the sleeping princess. Saying this, she once again blessed the little princess and went away. The king and the queen were heartbroken to hear such a cruel prophecy about their beloved daughter. They cried and cried till their tears all dried up. Then they stopped crying and thought about what should be done in the times to come. The king did everything he could do to escape from the curse on his beloved daughter. He banned spindles from the kingdom. Posters were struck everywhere warning that no one should use the spindle. At last, the prince's 16th birthday came. Everyone in the castle were busy preparing for the party. The maids did not allow the princess to stay in the ballroom. Everywhere the princess went, people said, "Darling, you are not supposed to come out. Go away." She was not supposed to see the preparations for her birthday party. At that time, the king and the queen were out. The princess began to feel lonely and restless. She decided to divert herself, running up and down the palace. So she went round into all sorts of palaces, all sorts of places, looked into rooms and bedchambers where she had never seen. At last, there she saw a staircase. She was speedily climbed the stairs, and cobwebs brushed against her golden hair. At the top of the stairs, there was a thick wooden door. A rusty key was in the lock, and from behind the door there came a strange whining noise. The princess pushed the door open and went in. There she saw an old woman sitting at the spinning wheel, singing and holding something pink and fluffy. Her spindle moved as fast as the wind. The princess was surprised to see the old woman sitting all alone in the room. She was even more surprised to see the strange thing which was kept before the woman and which she was working. It was a strange thing to the princess, and she had never before seen a spindle throughout her entire life. Full of curiosity, the princess came near the old woman and looked carefully at her. "What are you doing?" asked the princess. "I'm spinning some pink silk, my dear child." "Oh, what a clever machine," said the princess, watching the spindle moving to and fro. "What is this, and how do you do it?" "This is a spindle, dear. It is used to weave the threads for making clothes," said the old woman. Curiously, the princess said, "Give it to me." Saying this, she came forward and touched the spindle. She had no sooner taken it in her hand then, whether being very hasty at it, somewhat unhandy, she pricked her finger and at once fell down on the pile of silk in a deep sleep. When the princess fell down as if dead, the good old woman became very scared and, not knowing what to do, cried out for help. She began shouting, "The princess is dead, princess is dead." Hearing her shout, people came in from every quarter in great numbers. They threw water upon the princess's face, unlaced her, struck her on the palms of her hands, but nothing would bring her to herself. When the princess did not regain consciousness, all the people became scared. They could not understand what has happened. Though the princess had fallen down as if she was dead, her cheeks were still pink and her lips were red. When the people could not understand what to do, they informed the queen. When she heard about the incident, she came running. The queen did her best to awaken the daughter, but all her efforts were in vain. Then she thought of calling the physicians. She gave orders to her attendants to summon them. The doctors tried and gave all sorts of medicines. Now seemingly all hope was lost, and thinking thus the queen started crying. The king, who was holding a council with his ministers, soon got to know about the incident. When he heard about all that had taken place, he was heartbroken and cried a lot. But then he remembered the incident that has happened 15 years ago and the prophecy that the wicked fairy had made. When he thought of it, he consoled himself that the prediction of the fairies must necessarily come to pass. So he gave orders to his attendants that the princess should be carried into the finest apartment in his palace. He then ordered a bed all embroidered with gold and silver. The king commanded that the people should not disturb her, but let her sleep quietly till her hour of awaking came. Meanwhile, the good fairy who had saved the girl's life by condemning her 100 years was in a faraway land. But instantly she was informed about this incident by a little dwarf. The fairy came away immediately, and she arrived at the kingdom of the sleeping princess after an hour after in a fairy chariot which was drawn by 7 dragons. When the fairy reached the palace, the king and the queen were overjoyed to see her. They were filled with a new hope. The queen took the fairy's hand and led her away to the palace. She narrated to her all that had happened. When the fairy heard all about the incident, she approved of everything that the king had done. When will my daughter wake up? The sorrowful queen asked. Maybe in 100 years' time, said the fairy. Oh, what would make her wake? Asked the queen, weeping. Love, replied the fairy. If a man of pure heart were to fall in love with her, that would bring her back to life. As the fairy had very great foresight, she thought when the princess should awake, she might not know what to do with herself, being all alone in the old palace. Then the fairy thought of a good solution. So she touched everything in the palace with her magic wand. The king, the queen, governors, maids, ladies of the bedchamber, gentlemen, office stewards, cooks, guards, pages, and the footmen. Likewise, she touched all the horses which were in the stables, the great dogs, the princess' little spaniel which lay by her on the bed. Immediately upon her touching, all the inmates of the castle fell asleep. Not only did the men and the women fell asleep, but also the animals and the birds also. The wind dropped and the flags on the turrets stopped fluttering. It was as if the whole castle and the kingdom was holding its breath. Time began to roll quickly. The plants in and around the palace grew very tall and thick. The fairy gave here in a very extraordinary sample of her art that the princess, while she was continued sleeping, might have nothing to fear from any curious people. But the story of the Sleeping Beauty went about the country. From time to time, many a princess who heard the story came there and tried to get through the thorny hedge into the castle. But they found it impossible. In due course, 100 years passed. One bright morning, a handsome prince in a neighboring country came riding to the kingdom. He was the only child of his parents and was thus beloved and much pampered by them. Nevertheless, he was good and kind young man who was generous to the people also. He wanted to explore new places, get to know new people, and make new friends. With this object in mind, one day he decided to venture out on his own. Thus the prince came upon the edge of the dark forest. Being adventurous, he decided to explore it. The young man stood still in amazement. All of a sudden, a very good countryman addressed him, saying, May it please your royal highness, it is a palace. It is now about 50 years since I heard from my father. He then told the story of the beautiful princess who had been asleep for 100 years, and that the king and the queen and the whole court were asleep. The prince was all on fire at the words, believing without weighing the matter that put an end to this rare adventure. He was pushed on by love and honor. Then he declared, I am not afraid. I will go and see the beautiful princess. The good countryman tried his best to dissuade him, but the prince did not listen to his words. So he rode on his horse to the hedge of thorns, and as he trotted up, it burst into blossom before his very eyes. As the scared prince advanced towards the wood, he watched in surprise that all the great trees, the bushes and the brambles give way of themselves to let him pass through. When the prince reached the castle, he saw that the complete castle was covered with the creepers and the wild plants. He entered inside. He went on further, and in the great hall he saw the whole of the court lying asleep. There he saw a beautiful princess lying.
What a beautiful girl she is, the prince exclaimed. He had never seen anyone as lovely as her. He approached her trembling and with admiration, and he kissed her. As soon as he kissed her, the princess opened her eyes and woke up. She stretched her arms. The enchantment was at an end. Looking at the young and the handsome prince, she said to him, I have had a lovely long sleep. In the meanwhile, the entire palace awakened. The king awoke, and the queen awoke, and the whole court and looked at each other in great astonishment. The princess led the prince down to meet her parents. The king and the queen gasped with joy when the prince asked if he could marry their daughter. They agreed at once. Instead of a birthday, they'll have a wedding, they said happily. The good fairy was instantly informed of the incident by the same dwarf who had boots of 7 leagues. He came away immediately. The king and the queen were very happy to see her. She blessed the princess and the prince attended the wedding. The handsome young prince married the beautiful princess and they lived happily thereafter.
I think everyone liked the story. What is the moral of the story? See, when you listen to a story, you should predict a moral. You should guess a moral. So what is the moral present in this story? Now you could have got it. I'll tell the moral. The moral of the story is sometimes life and growing up presents risks that no matter how hard you try to avoid them, you can't. But love conquers all. So obey your parents. They always think good for the children. Listen to them. We are always kind to the children. That children should understand. Whatever it happens, at last there is a way to win anything by love. Love your relations and keep them happy. Never give up. Keep trying. This is the moral we understand from this story. So after listen to a story, find the moral present in that story and register it in your mind and follow it in your life also, so that all your life will be successful. Thank you, children. If you like the story, give a like, subscribe and share as much as possible with your friends and relatives. I'll catch you soon with different and interesting stories like this. Until then, bye from yours, Uma Selvakumar. Thank you. Have a nice day.